Please divorce your husband. The truth is, he has been with your daughter. I went to the high-end restaurant I had always wanted to visit, without telling my husband. There, we were suddenly approached by the maitre d' who said those shocking words. At first, I was suspicious, wondering what she was talking about, but as I listened to her story, I turned pale. If you think I'm lying, please come with me. We were guided to a private room with VIP seats, typically used by the wealthy. When I learned the truth there, I immediately took my daughter and fled to my parents' house. My name is Beverly. I am 25 years old this year, and I am facing the biggest crisis of my life. Recently, I discovered that the man I had been dating was cheating on me. Moreover, he told me he wanted to marry his affair partner and abruptly ended our relationship. I have a 3-year-old daughter named Cynthia with this man. Although he paid child support and a lump sum for the divorce settlement, it was far from enough. I needed to find a job quickly to secure a stable income for Cynthia's sake. After numerous interviews, I was hired as an office worker at a small local business. It was Dustin, my trainer, who guided me during this time. He had also gone through a divorce and was in a similar situation to mine. With that common ground, we became close even outside of work, and once we went out together with Cynthia. During that outing, he treated Cynthia as if she were his own daughter. I started thinking that maybe I could trust this person. Just when I began considering a future with Dustin, he proposed to me. From there, my new life began. Soon after our marriage, Dustin asked me to quit my job. Cynthia would be happier if Mom was around more. My income alone is enough for us to live comfortably, so please trust me on this. How about it? He was highly trusted at work and was a central figure admired by everyone. He was entrusted with many significant projects, and his salary was several times higher than mine. Indeed, his income alone was enough to live without any financial strain. And above all, I appreciated the idea of having more time to spend with Cynthia, who had been feeling lonely due to my busy work schedule. I gladly chose to become a housewife. After quitting my job, I could prioritize housework, making the house much tidier. Cynthia's smiles increased, and everything seemed to be going well. Though Dustin was busy and often came home late, he always made sure to return by 9 p.m. to say goodnight to Cynthia. Cynthia had grown so attached to Dustin that she refused to sleep until he came home. Sorry for always being late. Cynthia always looks so sleepy. Dustin, you work so hard every day. Please don't overdo it. We were a wonderful family who cared for each other. Since we couldn't spend time together during the weekdays, Dustin made sure to spend a lot of time with us on weekends. We would go to the nearby park or he would cook lunch for us. I thought this was what a perfect person must be like. But suddenly, one day, I began to notice something off about Dustin's behavior. It was that he often wanted to go out alone with Cynthia. Whenever I suggested going to the park together, Dustin would look slightly troubled. Beverly, you can rest at home, you know? You must be exhausted from all the housework and childcare. No, I'm fine. I'm managing at my own pace. Besides, I've made lunch, so let's all eat together. Oh, yeah. Sure. I'm looking forward to it. Dustin thought he was fooling me, but those subtle changes caught my attention. Once, I asked Dustin why he wanted to be alone with Cynthia. He answered seriously. Cynthia is attached to me, but our time together has been short. I want to become her real dad as soon as possible. When Beverly is around, Cynthia tends to rely on her. So, I think it's better for me to be alone with her to build that bond. Dustin seemed to be genuinely considering his relationship with Cynthia. I was pleased, and since that conversation, I tried to respect their time together. However, sometimes their outings took an odd turn. For example, he wanted to dine at a high-end restaurant known around the neighborhood. I was surprised, but Dustin just laughed it off. It's important to let her experience good food from a young age. It's part of her education. That might be true, but if you're going to such a place, I would have liked to join. Having 3 of us would be too expensive. Please understand. After returning from the restaurant, Dustin would always bring back some dessert. These fancy dinners happened every 2 months. I was quite envious, but Cynthia didn't seem to enjoy it much. She still preferred mac and cheese or pancakes over gourmet meals. Dustin's way of showing love was a bit unconventional. Yet, I still trusted him. One morning, while having breakfast, there was a news story on TV. It was about an incident far from our area involving a suspicious person lingering around a kindergarten, staring inside. I continued eating without much thought. However, Dustin turned red with anger. Children are precious to their parents. It's terrible that such weirdos target them. It's scary, but it's not happening here, so we're safe. You never know. Weirdos are everywhere, like cockroaches. While it was a distressing news, I didn't think it warranted such anger. Seeing Cynthia's surprised face, Dustin calmed down. Oh, sorry. I'm just worried. Cynthia will need to start kindergarten soon, right? Indeed, it was time to decide on a kindergarten for Cynthia. I suggested a nearby one that seemed good, but Dustin immediately shook his head. No, the location isn't safe. If a weirdo shows up, there's no escape route. Aren't you overthinking this? If we're prepared, there's nothing to worry about. Money is no issue, so let's choose a top-notch kindergarten. Don't you care about her? I felt cornered and had no choice but to agree. Dustin's excessive worry about Cynthia could be tiring. But perhaps that's how dads are with their daughters everywhere. All my suggested kindergartens were rejected, and Dustin chose one on his own. It was an impressive place. A newly built kindergarten with top-notch security, according to rumors. The education level was high, and wealthy families were eager to enroll their children there. I never imagined my daughter would attend such a place. The tuition was incredibly high, but Dustin paid it without hesitation. I was amazed by his financial generosity. Thanks, I feel relieved now that she's there. Cynthia will probably love it too. Oh, it's nothing for our precious daughter. He seemed very pleased with himself for doing a good deed as a dad. But the real struggle started after that. We only had one car, and Dustin used it to go to work, so I couldn't use it for drop-offs and pickups. So, I had to take the bus to take Cynthia to kindergarten. The kindergarten itself was perfect, with excellent facilities. However, the distance was just too far. I had to commute an hour each way, even in the rain, and I still remember how tough it was at the beginning. I mentioned it casually to Dustin once. But he looked extremely displeased. So, are you saying you want to quit because it's hard to do this for Cynthia? How is that okay for a mom to say? No, it's not like that. I just wanted someone to listen because I'm a bit tired. It's sad for Cynthia if her mom thinks it's a hassle when we're the only ones who can protect her. Dustin muttered, making me seem like the bad guy, and cut off the conversation. At that moment, I was convinced that his love was skewed. I started to distrust Dustin and began consulting him less and less. He would go out without me on weekends and come home late on weekdays, so our daily life was not affected. Dustin didn't say anything either, so our awkward relationship remained. Despite all this, children continue to grow. Cynthia graduated from kindergarten and entered a prestigious elementary school. At first, she was confused by the new environment, but by the second grade, she had made friends and seemed to be enjoying herself. During this time, his food education continued. Cynthia was at an age where she could appreciate good food. It's important to know the taste of quality, but I'm worried about its negative impact. Whenever I asked Cynthia about her day, she still seemed down. Doesn't it seem a bit gloomy when you have meals with Dad? Maybe he always orders food you don't like? No, that's not it. It was clear Cynthia was hiding something. But she wouldn't tell me. When I consulted Dustin about it, he was adamant there was nothing wrong. She seems genuinely happy when she's with me at the restaurant. Maybe she's just annoyed by you? It's probably just a phase. Dustin laughed, but Cynthia's reaction was not that simple. She must have a problem she can't tell Dustin. When I was young, I often confided in Mom rather than Dad about school fights or study troubles. I decided to make time for Cynthia. I told her about it a week after I noticed something was wrong. Cynthia, how about having dinner with Mom this weekend? Dad has to work, so he won't be home. Coincidentally, Dustin had an unexpected business dinner that day and had to work on the weekend. It was the perfect timing to avoid any trouble with him. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Cynthia's expression brightened a bit. Maybe she would finally tell me something. I was so happy that I splurged and made a reservation at a fancy restaurant. I had been saving up bit by bit, so we could afford a little luxury this once. The purpose was to hear Cynthia out, but I was also a little excited. Then, we arrived at the fancy restaurant, where the maitre d' greeted us warmly. When the maitre d' saw Cynthia, his eyes widened, and he approached me quickly. Are you this young lady's mom? Yes, I am. Is something wrong? Feeling intimidated by the maitre d's urgency, I was taken aback by his next words. You need to divorce your husband. He's actually... At that moment, the maitre d' whispered something in my ear, trying to keep it private from others. The content of his words was so unbelievable that my face turned pale. Even if you say such a thing out of the blue. If you don't believe me, come with me. She led us to a luxurious private room, different from our reserved table. This is a VIP room used by executives and important people from the company. Your husband is dining next door right now. After hearing this, I could faintly make out some voices. Determined, I listened carefully, almost letting out a gasp. My wife is completely useless. She's terrible at parenting and housework. Compared to her, she's so much better. I want to divorce her and marry her soon. I had noticed that our marriage was growing cold. But I never could have imagined the name of the woman Dustin mentioned. I lost all appetite and, taking Cynthia with me, rushed out of the restaurant. Dustin is the worst. I don't want him to see Cynthia anymore, nor do I want to see his face. Cynthia seemed to feel the same way, nodding quickly when I told her we would go back to my parents' house. Although I hadn't noticed what was troubling her, she still trusted me as her mom. That was my only solace. The night we returned to my parents' house, Dustin's calls began. Ignoring them continuously was frightening, so I reluctantly answered. Where are Cynthia and you? And why does it look like you left in the middle of the night with half the stuff gone? What's your goal? His unprecedented attitude sent chills down my spine. I told him I didn't want to see him now, but he wouldn't listen. I bet you're at your parents' house, right? I'm taking the day off work tomorrow and coming over, so wait for me. Don't you dare run away. After he hung up violently, it took several minutes for my heart to calm down. Holding the trembling Cynthia close, I asked my parents to hide her. I had them take Cynthia out when Dustin was supposed to arrive. That way, she wouldn't be in danger. The next morning, Cynthia left with my parents. Dustin stormed into my parents' house before noon, aggressively ringing the doorbell. Sensing I was alone, he clicked his tongue. Yesterday, I lost my cool. But leaving so suddenly is cruel. I was worried about you and Cynthia. His supposedly concerned words only made me feel disgusted. The Dustin in front of me was just acting. I knew his true feelings from what I heard at the restaurant. Did you really worry about me? What? Of course. What are you talking about? Feigning ignorance, I glared straight at him. It seems like you have someone else you love. Don't be ridiculous. Why would you think that? I operated my smartphone and played a certain recording. My wife is completely useless. She's terrible at parenting and housework. Compared to her, she's so much better. I want to divorce her and marry her soon. I had recorded the conversation I overheard at the restaurant. Dustin's face stiffened instantly. Why were you there? Be quiet. There's more to this recording. I pleaded in a low voice, and Dustin recoiled in fear. In the silence, the recording continued, speaking plainly. When I met her, I thought it was fate. Not now, but I was sure we'd be together someday. Then, after a deep breath, Dustin clearly said the name. I'm really looking forward to it. Her name is Cynthia. The recording ended there. I couldn't help but feel goosebumps all over. The client must have thought Cynthia was some affair partner. He laughed mockingly. But it couldn't be helped. No one would ever guess he was talking about his own child. What is this? Were you thinking that way about such a small child? No, it's a misunderstanding. Dustin started to panic and began explaining something outrageous. I just meant that Cynthia would be ideal when she grows up. She will be absolutely beautiful. Everyone will turn their heads to look at her. It's fine if you think that, but wanting to marry her, wanting to divorce me, that's crazy. That's part of parental love too. If you can't accept it, it's because you don't understand. He seemed convinced that his thinking was completely correct. Realizing that we were getting nowhere, I pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared. I can't understand your way of thinking. We can't stay married. Please divorce me. Divorce? What about Cynthia's feelings? That's for you to consider. Last night, Cynthia told me everything. I finally understood why she never seemed happy when she went out with you. At first, Cynthia hadn't noticed his abnormality. But as she grew older, she realized he wasn't keeping a proper fatherly distance. Cynthia had been rejecting Dustin since before she started elementary school. Even so, Dustin continued to spend time alone with her in private rooms of fancy restaurants, away from prying eyes. Unable to bear it any longer, she repeatedly tried to ask me for help. But each time, Dustin would say something like this. Do you really want to make Mom worry with your misunderstandings? If we get divorced, we might not have food tomorrow. Mom would be so sad. With such heartless words, he kept manipulating our young child. Thinking about her feelings at that time made my anger surge. Still, Dustin showed no remorse and instead became angry. This is a matter between me and Cynthia. Outsiders should stay out. He snatched the divorce papers from me and immediately signed them. Now Beverly is truly an outsider. I'll take Cynthia. I was speechless at his audacious demand. Even now, he thought he could claim Cynthia as his own. No way, not to someone as dangerous as you. Then tell me, How will you support Cynthia with no job? Tuition isn't cheap, and living expenses aren't trivial. When he brought up money, I felt weak. He was right. Our household was entirely supported by Dustin, and I had no financial means. I can hire a lawyer and take this to court if I have to. Spending that much is worth it to get custody of Cynthia. Feeling victorious, Dustin looked down on me smugly. Let's discuss Cynthia's custody in a month. I'm not a monster. I'll give you time to say goodbye. I'll file the divorce papers, so enjoy your last moments with Cynthia. Holding the divorce papers, Dustin left the house. He was seriously determined to take Cynthia away from me. The intensity of his resolve sent shivers down my spine. I quickly contacted a detective agency. At that moment, I had no idea what kind of information I would uncover. A month later, Dustin wouldn't be the one smiling. Justice would be served to the wrongdoers. A month later, Dustin called. He said he was coming to the house again, so I hurriedly suggested a different location. If there was a scene here, it would trouble my parents and neighbors. We decided to meet at a nearby cafe. The cafe had a cozy, hidden charm, and it wasn't very crowded. I figured that in a public place, Dustin wouldn't cause a scene. Dustin agreed to the location, so we arranged to meet there. I arrived early and was sipping my coffee when Dustin walked in with a man in a suit. Sorry to keep you waiting. Did you enjoy your last moments with Cynthia? I looked up as the man accompanying him introduced himself politely. I've also brought a lawyer. You can't escape now. As soon as he sat down, Dustin leaned forward, eager to settle things immediately. Why don't you order something first? We don't want to disturb the cafe. Frustrated, Dustin clicked his tongue and ordered a coffee. The waitress quickly brought our orders. Thank you for visiting today. Here is a complimentary service from the house. As Dustin drank his coffee, he glanced at the complimentary item. The next moment, Dustin's eyes widened in shock. No wonder, the waitress had placed a voice recorder on the table. Without hesitation, the waitress pressed play. A loud recording began playing in the cafe. It captured Dustin's horrible remarks collected by the maitre d' at a fancy restaurant. Dustin quickly stopped the recording, eyes wide with panic. Surprised? That's proof of the nasty things you've said to Cynthia at the restaurant. The maitre d' helped gather it. That old hag! How far will she go to mess with me? Sweating profusely, he clutched the voice recorder roughly. Then he turned his anger towards the waitress. You went too far, even if she asked you. Interfering in someone's family issues like this. For the first time, Dustin clearly saw the waitress's face and froze. Awkwardly, he began to speak. Could it be? Holly. Yes, quite a late greeting, isn't it? The waitress, Holly, looked down at Dustin with contempt, as if he were trash. This woman was the weakness the detective agency had found. Dustin's ex-wife, the one he divorced before marrying me. She was Holly. No one knew Dustin's past better than her. According to the detective agency, she had some crucial information. So, I asked her for help. She readily agreed. She even went so far as to lend us this privately owned cafe, which was very considerate and commendable. Under Holly's gaze, Dustin was paralyzed, like a frog being stared down by a snake. What? Why are you here? Are you planning to steal my lover again? Even though he tried to sound strong, his voice cracked and lacked authority. I faced Dustin with unwavering determination. I've heard a lot from Holly. It seems your last divorce was for the same reason. What are you talking about? There's no proof of that. I have proof. The agreement you signed during the divorce. Holly slammed the papers on the table. It was a restraining order preventing Dustin from approaching Holly's daughter. You were obsessed with my daughter when she was just in kindergarten. And now, again. You're really disgusting. No. It's just that my parental affection is being misunderstood. If you make any more excuses, shall I contact the lawyer from back then? They must have detailed records. Dustin shrank under the glare. He seemed to be racking his brain for a way out, but it was a futile effort. Why is Holly siding with this guy? She's not even family. She's not just anyone. She's a valued customer of mine. Holly smiled at me, and I nodded back. Actually, I used to come to this cafe almost every day. That was when Cynthia was going to kindergarten. The long commute to and from the distant kindergarten was exhausting, and my energy was at its limit. So I found this cozy cafe and would always stop by on the way home for a coffee and a slice of cake. I started this cafe as a hobby, but there were tough times with few customers. During those times, Beverly came frequently. We became friends since then. Holly has a daughter slightly older than Cynthia. We often discussed parenting and chatted about various things, never imagining she was Dustin's ex-wife. So it was no surprise I was shocked when the detective agency revealed Holly and Dustin's connection. But that revelation was crucial in protecting Cynthia from Dustin. Bringing up the past is unfair. It's outrageous. I earn more, so I should get custody. Dustin began to shout in a panic, while his lawyer beside him held his head in his hands. Apparently, the lawyer hadn't been informed about Dustin's past. If he had known, he would never have taken on this losing battle. Realizing that custody was slipping away, Dustin stood up, clenching his teeth. Please, Beverly. Cynthia is my destined partner. Please give me custody. No matter how many times I refused, Dustin kept begging. Feeling troubled by his pathetic display, Holly called the police. This guy did the same when he begged me, crying. He hasn't learned a thing. Let's get him out of here. Shut up! This has nothing to do with you. Dustin was restrained by me and the lawyer as he ranted. The police arrived quickly, and he was easily taken away in a patrol car. As the storm passed and the cafe became quiet again, Holly and I laughed together. Good job! Want some cake? I'd love to, but I think I'll head home today. I want to see my kid's face. I promised to come back with Cynthia another day and left the cafe. The satisfaction of protecting my child filled me up. And so, I began my days as a single mother, living with my parents, focusing on raising my child and job hunting. Although Dustin was released soon after, a restraining order was issued to prevent any future harm to me or Cynthia. He was never allowed to come near us again. With the police on my side, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. However, this world is full of dangers. One day, when Cynthia came back from school, she said something that worried me. Mom, there's been a strange person around school lately. The teachers are going to be patrolling, and they asked if the parents could help too. Apparently, there had been sightings of someone suspicious around the area, similar to those we had seen on the news before. Given the frequent reports, the school had asked parents to keep an eye out during pickup and drop-off times. Each of U.S. parents took turns monitoring specific areas to ensure the children's safety. 2 days into this tense routine, the situation took an unexpected turn. While I was covering my designated area, a child coming home from school reported a sighting. I rushed to the spot immediately. There, hiding in the bushes and peeking towards the school, was a man in shabby clothing. As I drew a breath to call out to him, I caught a glimpse of his face and was shocked. Wait, could it be? Dustin? The man stumbled back, falling to the ground in surprise. His face was now clearly visible, and my suspicions were confirmed. The person who had been causing such a scare was Dustin. The very person who had been so outraged by past incidents of similar behavior was now in such a disgraceful state. I felt more pity than anger or fear.
It's not what you think. I would never hurt Cynthia. Please, believe me.
You used to be so angry about people like this on the news. How is what you're doing any different now? At my words, Dustin began to tremble. His voice quivered with fear, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor.
That incident was about some pervert with impure intentions. I'm just a concerned father.
From my perspective, or anyone else's, it looks like the same disgusting, selfish crime. Ignoring Dustin as he tried to explain himself further, I pulled out the security alarm the school had provided us. The loud noise blared, and Dustin, stumbling repeatedly, took off in a panic. Other parents, alerted by the alarm, quickly gathered and restrained him.
Why? I was just watching. I'm her dad.
Once again handed over to the police, Dustin made a scene, not caring who heard. Then suddenly, he went silent, staring at one spot. Following his gaze, I felt a chill run down my spine. There, among the gathered crowd, was Cynthia. Before I could react, Cynthia pushed her way through the crowd and ran towards Dustin.
Cynthia! I knew you still loved your dad.
Dustin opened his arms wide, hoping for an embrace, but Cynthia stopped just out of his reach.
Cynthia! You don't have to be shy. Come here, let me hug you. You're disgusting. Don't ever show your face to me or Mom again. I hate you.
Cynthia's voice was loud and clear, enough for everyone to hear. Dustin froze as if time had stopped. Then, like a lifeless shell, he was led to the police car and packed in like a piece of luggage. As the car, sirens blaring, drove off, I ran to Cynthia. She smiled contentedly as I held her tight. I said it. I really said it. I feel so relieved.
You were amazing, so brave. But please, don't do anything dangerous like that again, okay?
I had always felt the need to protect her, but somewhere along the way, she had become a strong, independent person. Feeling the growth of my child, I think I'm not the only one who feels a little lonely. Due to the recent turmoil, Dustin is now securely behind bars. The news that a suspicious person had appeared at a prestigious school, and that it was actually a former guardian with strange hobbies, caught the public's attention. For a while, it was even featured on television, and Dustin, whose real name was reported, probably has no place left in society. He was well regarded at his company, but his reputation plummeted. He was immediately dismissed and lost his job. On top of that, he had to pay the alimony and child support all at once from the ongoing divorce trial, and with that money, we moved. I felt sorry for her, but a transfer was necessary. However, Cynthia kept smiling even when I talked about the transfer.
I can stay in touch with my friends, and I'm excited about the new school. As long as I have you, Mom, I'm okay anywhere.
Encouraged by Cynthia's cheerfulness, I searched for a job in our new location and finally got hired as a clerk at a small company. With the worry about living expenses gone, I was finally able to relax. Nowadays, Cynthia has gotten used to her new life and made new friends. It seems she is still in touch with people from her old school, and I feel she has become brighter than before. Although I'm busy with work and raising Cynthia, I'm living fulfilling days and feeling refreshed. My parents' house and Holly's cafe are just a bus ride away. I occasionally visit to rest my body. I also went to the fancy restaurant that helped with the incident to thank them. When I tried to give my thanks to the maitre d', she smiled and refused.
I just acted for the sake of our customers' smiles. If you come again and say the food was delicious, that would be the best thank you.
Seeing such a wonderful personality, Cynthia said she wants to become a maitre d' in the future. If she becomes such a cool woman, I would be very supportive. As if those hectic days were a lie, now we are full of happiness. From now on, as Cynthia's mom, I want to continue doing my best for her happiness.
Mom, I'm pregnant.
Stumbling over her words, my 14-year-old daughter Madeline reveals this to me. Her frail, haggard appearance makes it all too easy to imagine how much anguish and tears it took for her to utter those words. There's no trace left of the bright, energetic Madeline from before. I couldn't possibly believe what Madeline was telling me, but being handed a positive pregnancy test leaves no room for doubt. Still not fully grasping the extent of Madeline's pregnancy, I gently try to probe for more details.
It must have been so hard carrying this alone. Thank you for telling me. When did you take this test? I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Did you buy the test yourself? And who's the father?
If she's pregnant, there has to be someone responsible. I know I shouldn't pry too much, but without understanding the situation, I can't take the appropriate actions for her. Yet no matter how much I call out to her, Madeline just keeps mumbling apologies, either confused or terrified of something. The next day, I consult with my husband Daryl. But kind-hearted and extremely sensitive Daryl becomes distraught over Madeline's pregnancy. Worried for them both, the three of us head to the nearest station to go to an obstetrician. But on the train platform, I realize I forgot my insurance card and have to rush back home, leaving Daryl and Madeline. Returning home, I grab the insurance card and am about to hurry out when the landline, which rarely rings, starts ringing. Sensing something ominous, I pick up the receiver and receive news that Daryl and Madeline have been taken to the hospital. Not wanting to accept reality, I rush to the hospital, searching for them to no avail. An officer at the hospital tells me the truth, leaving me in utter shock. I burn with a fierce desire for revenge against whoever subjected my precious family to such a terrible fate. Back home, I gather the people I need to talk to and immediately confess.
Daryl and Madeline, they jumped in front of a train and committed suicide.
My name is Sherry. I'm 43 years old. Originally from Boston, I worked in sales at a major insurance company. But when I got married, I quit my job and moved to my husband Daryl's hometown in the countryside. We live with his parents. The reason is that I fell in love with Daryl, who was working hard to preserve the fine traditions of his parents' bespoke tailoring shop for the future, and wanted to support him. The products sold at my in-laws' bespoke shop were too good to let fade away. I fell for Daryl, but another big factor was that I felt strongly drawn to the products my in-laws were selling.
Sales have been in the red lately, haven't they?
Yeah, it's not good at all. It's the changing times, I guess.
Almost all the other shops have gone out of business.
Ours is pretty much the only bespoke tailor left around here. For a while after moving to the countryside, I also worked at the bespoke shop handling sales. So even without hearing the numbers, I knew we were operating at a loss. Most of our business hours are quiet, with no customers. My in-laws' acquaintances do come to buy things, but it's only a handful of patrons. It's not uncommon to go a whole day without a single customer. Even without sales, it still costs money just to keep the shop running. The people making the products here are my father-in-law Jody, Daryl, and a few other craftsmen. Sales are handled by my mother-in-law Sue, my sister-in-law Sylvia, and myself. It may be a small operation, But with employees to support, operating at a loss like this means we're on the brink of shutting down. At this rate, each day will just be a slow decline into ruin. I couldn't stand that. As a woman of action, I got permission from my in-laws to put my skills from my insurance job to full use, pitching our products to various shops. While looking for places that would carry our wares, I also started working on developing new products suited to the times. Still a novice when it came to bespoke tailoring, I first visited a couple who used to run a bespoke shop and were friends with my in-laws, to gain some knowledge. From there I expanded my network, researching and gathering information on what kind of bespoke tailoring is desired today. I've never seen suit designs like this before. But these are designs you develop together with various people. I'll discuss it with Dad and the other craftsmen. Thanks. I hope this can help boost our sales, even just a little. Thanks to the new products I painstakingly developed with many people, customer traffic began to increase slightly. After that, with the birth of my daughter Madeline, I no longer had the leeway to show my face at the shop. But wanting to contribute to sales even a little, I started selling our products on social media. Struggling for over a decade like this, I devoted myself to launching many new products, selling online, and securing partner shops to carry our wares. Before long, the bespoke shop had finally pulled through the crisis of closing down. As the bespoke shop's business got on track and Daryl grew into a fine craftsman, our daughter Madeline entered middle school. At an age where she could act independently and had a solid way of thinking, I felt a bit lonely realizing my role as a parent would gradually become less necessary. But more than that, I was filled with heartwarming feelings watching Madeline enjoy her days to the fullest, smiling brightly as she devoted herself to clubs and physical activities. About a year passed smoothly, and around the time Madeline turned 14 and advanced a grade. Madeline, who had been so lively and cheerful, suddenly became gloomy. At first I thought it might be teenage rebellion, but she still obediently listened to what Daryl and I said without avoiding us, so there had to be another reason. Madeline, did something happen recently? You don't seem like yourself. It's nothing. I think I'm just a bit tired from sports. I'm going back to my room. Even when I tried to make opportunities to talk, Madeline would only say she was tired from her sports teams. She started shutting herself in her room more, and Daryl and I grew concerned. After Madeline returned to her room, leaving Daryl and I alone in the living room, I couldn't help but voice my worries to him. Why do you think she won't talk to us? Am I that unreliable? Sherry, you're a wonderful mother in my eyes. When the time is right, I'm sure she'll open up to us. I wonder if something happened at school, or... I'm just as worried as you are. Let's be patient a little longer, Sherry. Encouraged by Daryl's kind words, I resolved to take my time and be there for Madeline. It's a sensitive time, she must be feeling so alone and anxious. Maybe at her age, parents seem annoying, but my feelings for Madeline, my love for her, will never change. Wanting her to feel that, I put in my utmost effort to face Madeline and continue supporting her. Weeks later, Madeline still hadn't regained her cheerfulness. Her face seemed even more strained, as if agonizing over something, and she often lacked focus. I spent my days desperately holding back the urge to pry out of excessive concern. Mom. Madeline came to me in the living room after I finished checking social media and packaging products for online sales. It was already late at night. Normally Madeline would be asleep in her room at this hour, but that day she came out and approached me. Maybe she was finally ready to confide her troubles. Thinking this, I shook off my sleepiness and had Madeline sit on the sofa for now. What is it, Madeline? It's okay, we have plenty of time, so take your time. Yeah. Madeline fell silent after that, seemingly at a loss for words or unable to muster the courage to speak. It felt like it had been a long time since I properly looked at Madeline face to face like this. Looking closely, there was no trace of her former energetic aura, and her complexion was poor. She often left her dinner unfinished lately and seemed to have lost some weight, so I was desperate to hear the rest of what she had to say. But I held back, knowing that pressing her now would only corner Madeline when she'd finally decided to open up. I waited patiently, gently rubbing Madeline's back. Finally, she opened her mouth heavily.
Mom, I'm pregnant.
What?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mom.
With trembling hands, Madeline took out a pregnancy test with a positive result. I was completely bewildered by this unbelievable reality. But seeing Madeline tearfully repeating apologies, I realized she must have been suffering alone with this worry for so long, and my heart ached. Madeline, it must have been so hard keeping this to yourself.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So, do you have any idea who? If you're pregnant, then. But no matter how I asked, Madeline only responded with sobs and apologies. I knew I shouldn't rush her, but it was difficult to plan our next steps without knowing the facts. I tried asking every question I could think of. Still, Madeline only trembled.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mom, forgive me. Please don't hate me.
It's okay, Madeline. I could never hate you. Madeline seemed to be crushed under the weight of what she had done, hyperventilating to the point where she couldn't give any details. It was late at night and she needed sleep to recover, so I soothed the panicking Madeline to calm her down, deciding to have her explain more at the hospital tomorrow. The next day, I woke up earlier than usual and woke Daryl. What's going on? It's so early in the morning. I'm sorry for the early wake-up call, but there's something important I need to talk to you about. It's about Madeline. As soon as Daryl realized it was about Madeline, he sat up immediately, ready to listen. I need you to stay calm when you hear this. Madeline is pregnant. I just found out in the middle of the night too. I only know the facts, but... Pregnant. You're joking, right? His disbelief was understandable. Daryl's eyes went wide, his voice and lips trembling as he forced the words out. As if to say, surely not our child. I felt the same way. I think Madeline had been agonizing over this for a while. After she told me, she kept apologizing over and over while hyperventilating. You've seen how she's been acting lately, right? Yeah. When Madeline told me, I was extremely shaken up too, all sorts of emotions threatening to explode out of me, but Daryl seemed to be taking the shock even harder than I did. I could tell he was trying his best to listen despite being upset, but it didn't feel like he was just passively taking in my words. Daryl has always been kind-hearted and sensitive by nature. Even without saying it out loud, he was probably imagining how Madeline felt, taking on damage as if it was his own. And as a father, he must have been shocked that his young daughter was pregnant. Until we get more details at the hospital, let's not say anything that might upset Madeline. We're planning to go to the OBGYN in the next town over today. I want you to come with us. Okay. I told him because I felt I couldn't hide the truth, but seeing how shaken and haggard Daryl became filled me with regret for saying anything. But I knew I was doing the right thing. Daryl must be desperately trying to process the reality of the situation. If that was the case, then I needed to take charge with a strong will. I felt bad for my in-laws, but I contacted them to let them know Madeline had suddenly fallen ill and got permission for Daryl and I to take off work. When Madeline woke up, I tried asking her again about the circumstances of her pregnancy, but couldn't get any solid information. Maybe it was hard for her to say in front of her father. With that thought, I simply gave the silent Madeline a gentle hug. As I did that, I realized our departure time was approaching and the three of us left the house. We took a taxi to the nearest train station. When we got to the platform, I realized I had forgotten something critical. I think I forgot Madeline's insurance card. In that case, should I go back and get it? No, you and Madeline wait here on the platform. I'll go grab it and be right back. I could have let Daryl handle it, but I felt uneasy about making the somewhat long walk alone in his current state, unable to hide his fatigue after hearing about Madeline. I didn't want him getting lost in thought and becoming careless. And I couldn't very well make Madeline walk unnecessarily when she looked ill. So I left the two of them on the station platform and headed back home. Our house is a fair distance from the nearest station. If there had been a taxi at the stand outside, I would have taken one, but there wasn't a single car there at a time like this. So I decided to sprint home at full speed. Honestly, I wanted to get Madeline to the OBGYN as soon as possible. As I ran, short of breath, I harshly criticized myself for forgetting something so important. I arrived home, put the insurance card in my wallet and was about to leave when the rarely used landline phone suddenly started ringing. I could have ignored it and rushed to the station, but I felt I had to answer. I dashed to the living room and picked up the phone. The caller was a nurse from the biggest hospital in the area. In a flat tone, she delivered the shocking news that Daryl and Madeline had been taken to the hospital. The hospital staff must have been swamped, because she didn't provide any other information, just telling me to come to the hospital immediately. In a daze, I called a taxi and headed to the hospital where the two of them presumably were. On the way, the taxi driver mentioned there had been a fatal accident on the train tracks, halting the trains. Hearing that, I broke out in a cold sweat, wondering if the people who jumped might have been Daryl and Madeline. The image of a depressed and unwell Madeline alongside a haggard Daryl, reeling in shock after learning of his daughter's pregnancy. A vivid scenario played out in my mind of these two impulsively jumping onto the tracks together as a train approached. It can't be, I told myself, but once the worst-case scenario popped into my head, it continued smoldering inside me.
Please let them be okay.
I arrived at the hospital and entered the ER where many nurses and doctors were rushing about in a flurry. Looking a bit further in, I saw the surgery in progress, light glowing red. An ominous feeling stirred up my chest, the negative speculations mocking my wish that I was just overthinking things. I couldn't very well talk to the frantically scurrying nurses, but I also didn't know where to go. As I stood there at a loss, a police officer approached me. "Is there something I can help you with?"
Actually,
I explained the series of events that led me here. The officer gave a small nod of understanding. It seemed he had been waiting for me. Then, he began to speak in a heavy tone about what had happened on the station platform with Daryl and Madeline. "Brace yourself for what I'm about to tell you. The truth is..." After that, I was stunned by the revealed facts. Burning with a desire for revenge, I left the hospital alone and returned home. Then, in order to report today's events to my in-laws and family, I had them gather in the living room after closing the shop. "I'm sorry, Jody, Sue. Sylvia, thank you for joining us too. What on earth is going on? I heard Madeline wasn't feeling well and got worried."
you don't think something happened to Madeline, do you?
While Jody and Sue expressed their concern, Sylvia looked bored as she inspected her nails. Her behavior only fueled my anger further, but I had to hold on just a little longer. I would expose her true colors. With that thought in mind, I began to speak, my emotions still running high. The truth is, Madeline is pregnant. And today, on the way to the obstetrician with the family, she and Daryl jumped in front of a train in an attempted suicide pact. My in-laws were left speechless by my explanation. Their reaction was completely understandable. The shocking nature of my words naturally left them at a loss. However, Sylvia's response was markedly different. Upon hearing the news, she began trembling, a look of panic spreading across her face. Her reaction was exactly as I had anticipated, and I had to stifle the laughter welling up inside me. As Sylvia turned pale and shook, my in-laws tried to calm her, their voices soothing. But Sylvia brushed off their attempts at comfort.
I'm not to blame. I didn't do anything wrong. I would have never imagined they would be jumping in front of a train.
With that outburst, she fled from the living room. Jody and Sue watched in bewilderment as Sylvia ran off, clearly having no idea what was happening.
What on earth? What's going on?
Suddenly, an ear-piercing scream rang out, prompting Jody and Sue to jump to their feet and rush out of the living room. There they found Sylvia, collapsed on the ground in shock. Standing before her were Daryl and Madeline, both leveling disgusted glares at Sylvia.
How dare you treat my precious daughter so cruelly? I can't believe it. I trusted you, Auntie. We've already consulted the police about taking appropriate action. You're going to have to take responsibility for what you've done.
Left behind by the rapid developments, Jody and Sue stared at me in utter confusion, clearly at a loss. Though my goal had been to expose Sylvia's misdeeds, I had still told a lie that left my in-laws reeling. Feeling the need to apologize and explain the truth, I began to recount what had really happened. When I arrived at the hospital, the police officer informed me that Daryl and Madeline had fallen down a flight of stairs on the train platform. According to eyewitness reports, Madeline had stumbled on the steps, and though Daryl tried to catch her, they both ended up tumbling down. A passerby who saw the accident called for an ambulance and reported the incident to the police. Thanks to their quick action, Daryl and Madeline were rushed to the hospital within minutes of the accident occurring. Though they were both covered in bruises, their lives weren't in danger and hospitalization wouldn't be necessary, much to my relief. The officer who responded to the call was exceptionally kind. Despite having already finished processing the scene, he waited for me, a family member, to arrive at the emergency ward. You mentioned that your daughter is pregnant. With a fall like that, I'm afraid there's a possibility she may have miscarried.
Oh no. I believe they're running tests now. Please, follow me.
The officer led me deep into the emergency ward, where I spotted Daryl and Madeline sitting on chairs in the hallway. I broke into a run, rushing to their side.
Madeline! Daryl! Thank goodness! Thank goodness you're all right.
Sherry, I'm so sorry for worrying you.
Mom! I'm sorry.
As I embraced them, I felt the warmth of their bodies and they responded to my frantic questions, bringing tears of relief to my eyes. Daryl's arms and head were wrapped in bandages, but Madeline appeared to be unharmed. While I was relieved by that fact, the officer's words echoed in my mind. To face pregnancy and miscarriage at such a young age was unimaginably cruel.
What about the test results?
About that. It turns out Madeline wasn't actually pregnant.
What?
Really? Madeline had apparently been worried about her missed periods. However, the doctor suggested that her young age, sleep deprivation, and stress were likely contributing factors. Her eating habits had also been poor recently, which undoubtedly played a role as well. But the pregnancy test was positive. The doctor thought that was strange too.
Madeline.
Where did you get that pregnancy test? Well, Auntie gave it to me. As soon as she began to explain, tears welled up in Madeline's eyes as a memory seemed to surface. I quickly pulled out a handkerchief and tried to wipe away her tears, but they continued to flow endlessly. Daryl and I listened intently to Madeline's halting, jumbled explanation, trying to piece together what had driven her to such despair. In summary, Madeline had been anxious about missing her period for 2 months. Having never experienced that before, she was filled with unease. Unfortunately, Sylvia found out about her worries. It's not normal to miss your period for 2 months, right? Something must be seriously wrong. Maybe you're sick, or maybe you're pregnant. You're right. I'm really worried. Why don't you take a pregnancy test, just to be sure? I have a few on hand. But I haven't done anything that would get me pregnant. Well, it doesn't hurt to check. Come on, it'll only take a minute. Overwhelmed by Sylvia's forcefulness, Madeline found herself unable to refuse and reluctantly took the test. And the result was positive. Despite not having engaged in any activities that could lead to pregnancy, Madeline was baffled by the test results and went to Sylvia for advice. I took the test, and this is positive, isn't it? Are you serious? Getting pregnant at your age is a disaster. Your life is basically over. I guess school is out of the question now, huh? But I haven't done anything that would get me pregnant. What? The test results don't lie. Do you know how accurate these tests are? 99.9%. That means you're pregnant. What are you going to do now? This is going to cause so much trouble for me and your mom and dad. Oh no! What should I do, Auntie? Though Madeline insisted she had done nothing wrong, Sylvia declared that the test results were absolute. Her expression turned terrifying as she berated Madeline. Panicking and at a loss for what to do, Madeline turned to Sylvia for help. But Sylvia just glared at her with utter revulsion, brushing off her pleas. Getting pregnant in middle school? What is wrong with you? That's disgusting. I can't believe you do something like that when you're so young. You're acting like a total slut. What? You can't even support yourself, and now you're pregnant? This is a serious crime, you know. We've worked so hard to get the store back on its feet, and now your baby is going to ruin everything and maybe even force us to close down. I will never forgive you if that happens. You better figure this out. Rather than providing Madeline with accurate information, Sylvia did nothing but stoke her fears before storming off, leaving Madeline alone to deal with the fallout. Abandoned and directionless, Madeline didn't know what to do. She wanted to reach out for help, but Sylvia's cruel words haunted her, paralyzing her. Madeline was terrified that her own parents, the ultimate authority figures in her life, would react the same way Sylvia had. Unable to voice her fears, she bottled everything up, heaping her troubles to herself. With no friends to confide in, Madeline was left to bear the crushing weight of a potential pregnancy all alone. The emotional strain sapped her energy, robbed her of sleep, and stole her appetite. In fact, it was sleep deprivation and malnourishment that caused the dizziness that sent Madeline tumbling down those fateful stairs. By the time Madeline finished her story, her face was a mess of tears and snot. No child should have to shoulder such a terrible burden alone. I pulled Madeline into a tight embrace. Daryl, having heard everything, was crying too. For a long while, the three of us just held each other. Madeline, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry I didn't notice. Me too. I'm sorry, Madeline. No, it's okay. I could feel you both supporting me, even if I didn't say anything. So, it's not your fault. As we hugged, I noticed Madeline was still crying, her body trembling. It seemed the incident had left her traumatized, and my heart ached for her. I couldn't forgive Sylvia for putting my child through such an ordeal. I told Daryl and Madeline to come home once they had calmed down a bit, then left the hospital on my own. After hearing the whole story, my in-laws turned to face Sylvia, their faces flushed with anger. Sylvia, finding herself without allies, glanced around nervously as she searched for words.
About that pregnancy test you gave Madeline. Could it have been a fake? I did some research and found out there are novelty tests designed to always show a positive result. They're mostly sold online.
Did you know that?
I don't know anything about that. I've never heard of such a thing.
Well then, you won't mind showing us your purchase history, right?
Why should I have to show you what's on my phone? No way. I'm not letting you snoop through my stuff.
If you really didn't know, you wouldn't be so defensive.
And you just said you never would have thought to do something like that, didn't you? Sounds to me like you're admitting guilt. I'm telling you, I don't know.
Sylvia tried to stand up and run away, but Jody grabbed her and demanded to see her purchase history. It seemed like she couldn't resist anymore. Then, Sylvia, resigned, threw the smartphone screen showing the purchase history towards me. I knew it. The screen displayed the record of a pregnancy test kit purchased as a prank. It was clear evidence of what Sylvia had done. Unable to hide it any longer, Sylvia confessed everything.
Yes, I did it all. From the start, I couldn't stand Sherry acting all high and mighty after suddenly showing up. So, when I found out about Madeline's irregular periods, I just thought I'd mess with her a little. It was just a joke. Why are you all ganging up on me and complaining?
Sylvia's confession revealed her selfish motives. The fact that I had contributed to Custom Tailor's sales and turned the business around. Moreover, through sales activities, I had become friendly with the neighbors and gained more acquaintances. From Sylvia's perspective, it seemed she didn't like that I was getting along better with everyone than she was. Unlike me, who always takes action and tries to interact with people, Sylvia had a passive personality. She had beautiful features and was recognized as a beauty by everyone. That's why Sylvia, who took pride in it, believed that others should always approach her first. She was friendly to those who did something for her, but cold to those who didn't do anything in particular. I think that's where the difference in our popularity stemmed from. What the heck?
Just because you're a little good at sales, you're getting carried away. I bet you just asked people for favors, sucked up to them, and got them to praise you. Everyone keeps going on about Sherry, even though you're uglier than me. Hey! How can you say that to Sherry? Sherry has been working hard for our store, desperately coming up with new products and finding sales leads, sacrificing even her sleep. What have you been doing in the meantime?
It's all right, Daryl, that's enough. I was furious at Sylvia's words, but this was in front of Madeline. I didn't want to show her a scene of us fighting with foul language. Perhaps sensing that, Daryl suppressed his anger and looked towards the front door.
We've called the police too, so we absolutely won't forgive you. There's no need to make such a big deal out of it. Can't you take a joke? I can't believe this.
Sylvia, who was taken away by Daryl, was being questioned by the police officer who had rushed over after Daryl's call, while loudly complaining. The officer was different from the one at the hospital, but it seemed like he had been briefed well and had a general grasp of the situation. Perhaps Sylvia was a little intimidated in front of the officer, or maybe she judged that it was better to tell the truth without hiding anything in order to be released quickly, but she honestly admitted the facts. Her tone was very light. Until the very end.
It was just meant to be a little joke.
It was a joke, so there's no need to apologize. She kept appealing to the officer. Seeing this, my parents-in-law kept apologizing to Madeline and me over and over again. It wasn't my parents-in-law's fault, but no matter how much we told them to stop, they wouldn't listen at all. While we were arguing back and forth, it seemed Sylvia had been released and came back to us. I went through hell. I really can't believe this.
Aren't you going to apologize to Madeline and Sherry?
That's right. You shameless woman.
Do you have any idea how much you hurt Madeline?
Huh? I keep telling you. It was just a joke. How many times do I have to say it for you to understand? Sylvia said mockingly, but in the end, there was not a single word of apology. Daryl, who had finished talking to the officer, returned to me with a frustrated look on his face. Judging from his demeanor, I could tell the result was not good. The police officer seemed disappointed too, but he said this case isn't one where an arrest can be made. He did give a stern warning, but it didn't seem like she was willing to listen. I see. I guess that's how it is. Sylvia, who had gotten off with just a warning, was triumphantly complaining. She didn't seem to care at all that she had turned my parents-in-law, me, Daryl, and Madeline against her. I had thought we could at least teach her a little lesson, but in the end, my revenge didn't go well, and I was left just feeling bitter. The next few days, I tried to avoid running into Sylvia as much as possible for Madeline's sake, but I couldn't come to terms with the situation. My in-laws kept apologizing to Madeline and me as always, but that wasn't the point. Why should we, who had done nothing wrong, have to be considerate and feel uncomfortable in our own home? Moreover, Sylvia had started finding fault with me and harassing me at the storefront too. Fortunately, it hadn't escalated thanks to Sue's stern glares, but the resentment was still building up. I couldn't put Madeline at ease here. Having come to that conclusion, I told Daryl that I wanted us to move out of my in-laws' place and build a house for the three of us. Back when Custom Tailor was struggling, there were times I didn't receive a proper salary, so I hadn't been able to save up, but in this rural town, rental properties didn't exist. If we wanted to live here, we needed to build a house. I knew it would be tough, but in order to somehow make it happen, I desperately focused on sales and online marketing. Then, a few months later, just as we were slowly building up funds, Sylvia suddenly abandoned everything, including her job, and casually left home one day. Apparently, the reason was that she had found her destined love. Furious at her utterly selfish reason, my in-laws' anger exploded. After calling her numerous times, when Sylvia finally answered, Jody declared, "You're disowned." He then roughly hung up the phone. A whole year had quickly passed since Sylvia left, and we had been considering moving out of my in-laws' place, but with Sylvia's sudden disappearance, we were still living with them. Business was still going great, and every day was consumed by work. I had almost completely forgotten about Sylvia's existence. Then, one evening, the house phone rang. Wondering who it could be at this hour, I watched as Jody, who was nearby, answered the call. Picking up the receiver, Jody let out a big sigh and furrowed his brow.
"Hey! The house is gone! What's going on?"
Hearing the familiar loud voice leaking out from the phone, Daryl and I, who were there, exchanged surprised looks. We had never dreamed that Sylvia would call. But Jody had a calm demeanor, as if he had known a call would come someday. "We sold the house a long time ago."
"Huh? I never heard about that. Tell me where you moved."
"Why would I tell you? You're no longer a part of our lives." In fact, about 6 months after Sylvia left, we had moved to the city. It was my in-laws who had suggested it. I didn't know the full circumstances, But there was no way someone with Sylvia's personality could live harmoniously with a man. My in-laws had been wary that someday, Sylvia would be kicked out and come back in a pinch.
What are you saying? The store. You have the store, don't you? You'll be in trouble if I don't take it over for you. I haven't forgiven you for calling custom tailor's work outdated and a garbage business. I'd rather close the store than have you take over.
Jody was so enraged like I had never seen before. Just like Daryl, he was usually gentle, and I had rarely seen him angry. For Jody to raise his voice this much, it must be quite serious. Still, I was surprised to hear that she had declared custom tailor's work to be an outdated garbage business in the past. Thinking about how my in-laws had forgiven such a worthless daughter and had continued on without abandoning her all this time, I couldn't hold back my tears.
I'll say it one more time. You're disowned. Don't ever show your face in front of us again. Wait a minute. I'm in a really tough spot right now. Money. I need money. Come on, Dad, help me out.
Before Sylvia could finish talking, Jody had hung up the phone, so I couldn't hear any more of her words after that. I could tell she had tried to win him over with tears at the end, but I wasn't sure how that pleading voice sounded to Jody. Jody's back after hanging up the phone was indescribably lonely, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Daryl gently patted my shoulder as I stood there at a loss for words. Far away from our hometown where the store used to be, we had no idea what became of Sylvia and were once again caught up in our busy daily lives. However, a few months later, while minding the store with Sue, a couple who were acquaintances of my in-laws from far away came to visit. This couple had continued to buy our products back when the store was on the verge of closing down. They had been purchasing through mail order for a while, but they had apparently come to see us while on a trip. And it was from this couple that I heard about Sylvia's current situation. It seemed that when Sylvia found out she had lost her house, she went around approaching anyone she could find in the neighborhood. Since it was a small rural area, Sylvia's misdeeds were already known to all the residents, and far from lending a helping hand, there was not a single person who even offered her kind words. A shameless woman who had hurt a girl of marriageable age with an unethical prank and remained defiant even to the police. She was apparently living her days with people talking behind her back. Even for Sylvia, living in that small town with no allies must have been uncomfortable. And as for Sylvia's partner, about whom we hadn't known the details, it turned out to be a man from the bar she frequented. Sylvia had become infatuated with a man at a certain bar a few train stations away from her hometown. Confident in her own beauty, Sylvia had no doubt that the man at the bar was in love with her. To make the barman even more crazy about her, she had poured in large sums of money and even used up all her savings. After leaving home, she had apparently been frequenting the bar, barely working and accumulating debt. But such a lifestyle couldn't continue forever, and when she reached a point where she couldn't repay her debts or borrow more money, she seemed to have sought help from the man she was so invested in. The man himself was questionable, but that was her own fault. After being swiftly dumped by a woman who was only beautiful and had recklessly created debt, she was apparently struggling to repay her loans without even receiving help. With no place to live, Sylvia was forced to live on the streets for a while. However, the residents, thinking it would be troublesome if she suddenly turned up dead after being on the streets for a long time, had Sylvia live in a dilapidated house with a hole in the roof that could hardly be called clean. And now, even in her hardship, unable to honestly work, Sylvia was apparently clutching her remaining money, riding the train, and trying to seduce any man who looked wealthy. And using the pregnancy test that would absolutely show a positive result, which she had given to Madeline, she was reportedly informing her numerous partners with whom she had physical relations that she was pregnant and demanding marriage or child support payments. I was astounded that she was still targeting rich men at this point, but apparently, that strategy had yet to succeed, and she was often seen returning to the rundown house in her hometown, exhausted. The area around her hometown was by no means urban, so Sylvia's bad reputation had spread in no time. There was a terrible woman, beautiful but threatening pregnancy to demand marriage and child support. As such rumors spread, it had apparently become difficult for her to even seduce men recently. Even when she occasionally succeeded in bringing a man home, she would end up having her money taken and only wearing herself down, according to the couple who visited the store. Having lost a home to return to and unable to maintain the beauty she had absolute confidence in, Sylvia's state must be quite unseemly. Having achieved revenge in an unexpected way, I felt a little lighter in my heart. It was a shame I couldn't see it with my own eyes, but I couldn't even spare the time to go see how Sylvia was doing now. She really is a hopeless child as always, causing trouble for everyone. Sue. Although she had declared Sylvia disowned, just like Jody, the inherently kind Sue seemed to be pained by Sylvia's current situation. She also seemed concerned about causing trouble for the former neighborhood residents, but the couple who visited the store laughed, saying it made for a good topic of conversation. After chatting for a bit, they purchased a few new products and left. Changing the subject, the reason my in-laws had suggested moving was that I had mentioned our past efforts to save up funds to move out of their house to avoid Sylvia. I had meant it as a casual conversation, but my in-laws said they would both contribute money to build a new home on a new piece of land. They had apparently also been considering relocating to a more convenient location for a long time and had been saving up. Thanks to that, we were able to build a better house than expected, with a factory next to the store-cum house. The craftsmen were all people who had fallen for my in-laws' character after overcoming the difficult times together, so they followed us to the distant new location. Recently, young apprentices who have been inspired by the quality of the products here have started joining us, saying they want to learn the techniques, and our whole family has begun working on passing down the tradition. There may still be a long way to go, but I feel a strong sense of fulfillment in this work. Ever since Madeline stopped the irregular lifestyle that the doctor had warned her about, perhaps because she has no stress, her menstrual cycle has returned to normal, and she seems to be getting along well with the friends she made at her new school. Moreover, Madeline has recently developed a strong interest in fashion and has started thinking about creating original designs for clothes, scarves, and such. Her design approach from a perspective that we don't have is full of new discoveries. Every day is so busy that I have no time to rest, but I felt fulfilled. I want to work hard to further expand the company and spread the appeal of custom tailor to many more people.